Hey, Alan.
And welcome to Dice Over Everything, our miniatures gaming podcast.
All right. So we, after a long break of playing like games, have finally started getting back to them. And
Yes, fuck you, COVID.
exactly.
This is an explicit podcast, by the way. If you don't like swears, too late.
Uh-huh. Because we're talking about GW this podcast, and a few are going to be
We have a
needed.
lot of emotions.
Mm-hmm. So we got in our first game of Kill Team. Actually, no, we
Yep.
got your second game or more, right? You got a couple
Yes, that's
games
right.
in, and my first game. So
Mhm.
we want to talk about sort of our initial thoughts on this. And just for background for people as well, we had played a couple games of the Kill Team 2019.
Yep.
And I think, is it now being referred? It's not, a lot of people are calling it Kill Team 2, but technically it's not Kill Team 2. It's just
Yes,
the
Kill
second mainstream version
Team.
of Kill Team.
Yeah, people are starting to call it Kill Team 2021.
Yeah, that's like the product.
COVID edition. Yeah, so this
Hmm.
podcast is all about Kill Team, our thoughts about Kill Team, and if you're excited or really hate it, or you just want to know about it, and you're trying to think about whether you want to buy it, we can tell you our first impressions, and we're going to go through it all.
So, just as the disclaimer, we did not buy the Kill Team Octarius, or is it Mr. Octavius box?
Yes, we did not buy it. We did the um,
The compendium based version?
Yes, the compendium version. So there's been a lot of hubbub about this new Kill Team. I feel like this launch was there's a lot of controversy about this launch and how things were launched and everything like that. So there's a lot of questions about it, but there's also a lot of excitement, right? Because this is effectively, although it bears the name of Kill Team, this is the like they mentioned, this is an entirely new game. Like
You're
the
not going to
only
use
thing that makes
you're not
it
going
the
to
same
use
as Kill Team is that it's a skirmish game set in the 40k universe using the uh, main factions that you can
so
run.
you're not willing to use the word they use for the game?
Oh, bespoke!
Of course. It's
It's
so
a
so
new
bespoke.
bespoke rules. I don't know
Uh-huh.
who it's tailored to, but yeah, it's specifically made just for their bean counters and their shareholders. So bespoke made to try and make as much money as possible.
Oh, so even
So
releasing, so maybe people are coming out of lockdown. They're like, oh no, we gotta get it out right now. That's what you're saying is timing for this release.
so I have a theory of and we'll get into why I believe in this later on. We talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly
Mm-hmm.
about Kill Team. I have a theory though that the reason why they released Kill Team right now is that their numbers were not high enough for their new release of Age of Sigmar 3, and so they had to push their Kill Team release up 3 months so that it makes it into the
The
their
2021 numbers.
yeah their what do you call it their yeah the 2021 numbers, basically their fiscal year end numbers. So they had to push it in so that they actually meet their targets, so that their shareholders, not the shareholders, their CEOs and things like that make their fat bonuses.
So is the title of this podcast the Kill Team Conspiracy? We're just gonna go through everything we think is just is weird is actually a conspiracy. It's
It
not just
is
incompetence.
now. Yes, it's not
So
incompetence, it's a conspiracy. It's
I
very
know.
competent. It's
Yeah.
exactly what they needed to do to make it. All
Okay.
right,
So
so
but
i
we
think
actually Mhm.
I think
Anyway.
before we go any further, let's go and set the stage. So in GW's headquarters, they're like, man, Age of Sigmar 3.0 didn't make enough money. We need to push out this game we've been designing faster. It is the new Kill Team. What is Kill Team though? How are we going to sell it to these people out there? Let's explain a little bit of what Kill Team is, as opposed to assuming everyone knows what it is.
All right, so Kill Team it uses all the big major factions you see in the Warhammer 40k universe,
Yeah,
but it
so if
lets
you're
you
into the far-flung grimdark universe of 40 Warhammer 40,000, but you don't want to play giant armies, you want to play small skirmish battles, Kill Team is supposed to be just for you.
yeah, and the advantage is like obviously you don't need to buy the thousands of dollars of models to build the army. You don't need that 4x6 table either. This plays on basically a poster-sized board that you can just fold
Yep.
out.
22 by 30 inches.
Yep, which is a big advantage because we're big into not having to build. Well, not I'm okay with big cool boards, but the giant army is really just is so slow it takes away from games. So we've leaned a lot towards skirmish. So you're in Kill Team, you're often taking between what, maybe 6 to 12 models, depending on the faction.
So I think it's 5 to 14. I believe. Oh, technically 4 to 14. I think is the change of size. But yeah,
if you're going
somewhere around there. 6 to 12. 5 to 12 is probably normal.
Yep. Okay. And in contrast to the previous versions, I think this is where a lot of the complaints come from, is that now the armies that you put into the game, you don't build, they're more pre-built, or at least you have sort of some lists you can select from. Whereas in the previous version, you would choose them model by model with some restrictions, but it's now much more constricted what your armies are.
Yes. So they've like they said, this is new, bespoke, sweet bespoke, just for you made rules. And so how they do that is they restrict your ability to run anything you want out of the Imperial Guard, for example. And now you have to run a very selected list that has to have 7 or 14 guys.
Yeah. And the armies are mostly based around what comes in one box of their figures. And we can get into it. Some of the armies are basically a combination.
Well, is there an Imperial Guard box that comes with 14 figures?
Who cares what happens to some of the other guys you toss? It's fine. You just toss a few.
Yeah, you're supposed to buy 2 Imperial Guard boxes.
I'm not saying they use them all. They're just based around the box.
Yeah.
They're not the box.
Yeah, so basically what happened, there's a bunch of controversies, and we'll go through them. The first one is, I guess that we're touching on, is that they have this base Octarius box, which seems like the true launch of Kill Team, and it comes with 2 different, especially to me, these are actually like bespoke, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean, Orc Commandos versus Veteran Guard, and I think it's 10 versus 10, right? And they have all these cool options, but on top of that, they said, hey, we understand not everyone likes Orc Commandos because they don't have taste. So instead, if you want to run your Space Marines or your Eldar and stuff like that, we're eventually going to release these, like fully like designed packaged of those armies. But for now, we're going to release a compendium. And this compendium has rules for all of the armies you used to be able to play in the old Kill Team to play in this brand new game. And that's what we ended up playing with, right? And this thing this is the thing where it's very, very limited in terms of what you can bring, right? So Imperial Guard, you have 2 squads of 7 guys, and you can only bring, I believe, 1 of every type of weapon. So you can't like spam plasma, right?
Which is okay, because GW is not going to balance the game. So it's probably best off they stop you from being able to take too much of any one thing.
So at least they played the armies, roughly speaking, of what you're going to be playing.
Yeah.
I hope you like bespoke tailor-made for you, because there's not as much customization as before.
Yep. And should we get to the part about how you actually pick your army once you get to the game, or should we get there later?
I don't know. What are you going to say about it?
So the thing is, in the old version of Kill Team, you would build your army beforehand, and then you would show up to your opponent and you drop them on the table.
Yeah.
Interestingly, for like a lot of games out there we've seen let you bring sort of 2 lists. They'll have a 2-list format. You show up, you see who your opponent is, and then maybe you look at their lists, maybe you just know what faction they have, and then you pull one of those 2 lists you think is going to be the best one to fight your opponent.
Yeah.
In Kill Team 2021, oddly, instead of just having a list built beforehand, you set up the game table, you put down the terrain, you pick your deployment zone, and then you begin building your army.
Yes. Do you think that people are going to do that, though?
If you want to win.
I don't know, man. Like, this is the same thing that's in Malifaux. And yeah, exactly. If you're playing a tournament, you'll do it. But most of the time, most of the games you play, I feel like you're building your army list before and you're coming and playing it. Now, that said, is it terrible? I think it's fine,
Yeah,
right?
because they've
The
restricted
issue though is like, well, sorry, go on.
because they've restricted the selection so much, it actually enables that to be possible. Whereas if you had to
Yeah,
write a list from scratch, picking individual model by individual model,
yeah.
that would just become way too
It might be
involved.
significantly more cumbersome. And
Yeah,
and you know, I was talking some shit about not having uh, enough variance, and I think that's definitely true for certain armies. But I'm overstating it for just I'm just teasing old Games Workshop for old time's sake.
mhm.
There's actually a bunch of equipment that you can that you when you play a game you have 10 points of equipment, right? And you
Yep.
apply that to your guys. So even if you have Space Marines, which are like an intercessor, which it's true, like a lot of people were complaining before about how this is too restricted because you always can, if you're running intercessors, you always only have 5. You can't have 6 or something by switching things up. There is 10 points of equipment, and the 10 points of equipment does give allow you to customize your guys, right? So as much as there is some restriction and it feels a little bit worse because to some people, right, they can't customize it entirely, you can still customize your squad. Like 5 intercessors are not going to be the same as 5 other intercessors by virtue of the 10 points of equipment they attach to the guys, right? Because they'll have different pieces. So there is still some customization, and you can bring your new thing and stuff like that. So that said, do you feel like the controversy of not being able to customize your guys enough, holds true, or do you think this is a little bit overblown?
So maybe we'll go back to the conspiracy. Maybe
Uh-huh.
these armies are meant to be sort of bland, or maybe they just didn't want to put in all the play testing because they knew they just wouldn't be able to do it, especially with people not gathering during COVID. And
Uh-huh.
they restricted themselves to building these very bland armies, and with the idea that they do continual product releases, which is kind of how
Uh-huh.
they've done Warcry in that to continue to expand it. The armies you're going to really want to play around are going to be the boxes they release in the future that have armies that aren't just,
Specifically, instead of like in the compendium, specifically for Killteam.
yeah, and they won't just have all like 5 to 7 of the same guys that you take as a
Mm-hmm.
group. They'll have much more fleshed out things because they keep calling them covert ops teams. Is that what
Yeah.
they refer to it as? Because they don't feel like covert ops.
Killteam operatives.
Okay. But it doesn't feel like an operative team when it's just like a squad that walked out there. They don't
Yeah.
feel individual, unlike the guys that are in the Octarius box,
Mm-hmm.
which they all feel unique because they're not so repeated. So
Yes,
that's
exactly.
they
It's like 10 guys that are special for the veteran guard, and I think there's like 12 options for the commandos, and you can only bring 10, right?
yeah.
And so each guy is different with special rules, and you can kind of mix and match like what you really want to bring in terms of your army. I
Mm-hmm.
I I I kind of feel like that's probably true, and this is why it goes back to my original conspiracy. Is like I wonder if they only finished 2 of the armies they were planning to launch with, and they're like, "Oh, we got to launch this quickly. Oh, whatever. Just release this compendium that we've been playtesting with all the other factions, and just push it out." Again, I assume they wanted to release a compendium anyways, but I'm just like,
Well, yeah, because they do it for well, at least in the 8th edition release of 40K, they put out
mm-hmm,
the index instead of
yeah,
having codexes ready for people right away, and
mm-hmm,
that quickly became redundant with the codexes.
yeah. Yeah, they
So
totally got me there too. I thought the indexes were the base were going to be the main rules, and then your codexes would just have a little bit of like extra stuff and fluff and like that. But literally, once the codex comes out, you shouldn't be playing your index, and it was actually quite frustrating because the index rules were, in my opinion, much more balanced than the codex stuff, right? And it was much more balanced and much more fun when I was playing Index. And as soon as people started getting the codexes, the 8th edition fell apart, in my opinion,
yeah, so
because
mhm.
Games Workshop can't balance rules.
Yeah, so back to like the whole issue with that of them. So the core box, if you bought the
Uh,
Octarius box and got the bespoke armies,
yep.
then you would get a bunch of terrain, which is nice orc terrain. You get
Yep.
these two armies that have a lot of
Beautiful models.
beautiful models in them, and you
Yep.
get the strategy cards that you really do want. You need them to play the game. We went out and got those to play the game. And then there's also barriers that come in it as well, which are important for your deployment
Mm-hmm.
and just how the whole rule set works. I don't know if we'll get to that or not.
Uh-huh.
But the fact is, the armies we played the Adeptus Mechanicus versus the Primaris out of the
Yep.
compendium. And we're pretty sure it's not balanced.
Yeah. So when they, Games Workshop marketing is now like so much better, right? That's their main competitive advantage currently.
Mhm.
Besides, they've always had good models, right? Like upper tier models in the miniature gaming space. But their new competitive advantages, their online marketing, they hired a whole new thing and they've been on fire. And they told us, hey, now that you don't have points, well, it's going to be so much easier, I guess, for Games Workshop to balance the armies. So everything will be much more balanced like we never believed.
Mhm.
Don't believe the hype. As much
Yeah.
as I talked shit about that and over exaggerated the limit of what you can take, because like I said, you can still actually customize your guys with equipment. There is no way they balance this more. Like if you think that just because everyone is running 14 guys, it's going to be balanced, you have to remember this is Games Workshop here, man.
Yeah.
They're just terrible at balancing their armies. They're like some of the least balanced game manufacturers out there. They create beautiful models, and then some of their game ideas are great, but in terms of tuning, I feel like they just don't do it.
They're not willing to do it. They don't want to admit their mistakes. So they're going to sell you. So if you want to play, you'll eventually get tired if you do the core box of playing those two same armies over and over.
Yeah.
So most players of the game, well, basically anyone who actually plays the game is going to want to go out and get this $50 compendium.
Yo,
The
by
thing,
the way, it's $50 for this compendium.
it doesn't even sound that bad when I paid like $24 for the card pack. But anyways,
I guess that's true, but the problem is the quality you get. Technically, the cards were not high quality either, though.
well, the quality once you
The
realize,
quality of the cards is lower quality than your $1.50 or $2 bicycle cards. Just telling you.
yeah,
Quality of the actual cards is lower than the cards I get, even from the dollar store, the $2 or $1.50 playing cards I get from there. It's lower quality.
you need to sleeve them or they're going to be dead in no time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, once you've gone out and bought this, and given GW's history of really being slow about making corrections or errata, that there's going to be this broken thing out there, and
Yeah.
it's not going to go away. And if it does go away, you're going to feel like you've wasted your money on getting this thing as well.
Yeah.
So
$50.
there's
Yeah.
no way to keep people happy with the route they've gone with this. Like
Yeah,
so
so I
many
feel
games,
like the compendium, like a lot of people complain about the compendium, $50 for these kind of rules, and they're not worth it, man. Like it's one thing for the $50 nice, I don't know, hardcover rule book that you can get for the main thing, which I'm not even sure it is. But for a compendium, when like you were saying, right, as soon as these new boxes come out, they're going to replace it. Like I'm sure there's going to be a new Space Marine, like just like the Octarius has the Orc Commandos and the Veteran Guard. The next box is probably going to be Space Marines versus something else, and it's going to feel really cool, really best book, like really well thought out in terms of this Killteam Space Marine army, right?
yeah,
But then when you open the compendium and you look at these things, you're like, this is like not nearly, I feel like, as well thought out as the Octarius stuff,
yeah. So
right?
from listening to other people's podcasts before we played the game,
Mm-hmm.
some of the people who talked about it were saying it would probably be best off if the individual model rules were just on cards. Because when you play the game, you keep having to flip back and forth through this book to go look up all the rules because you need the weapon stats that are under the guys. You
Yeah,
need all their stats, you need their abilities, and you end up
yeah.
just flipping back and forth through this book. And it would have been so much easier if they could have been large format cards or something. So you could just, everyone could have them ready and not have to sort of trade the book back and forth, not have to flip
So
around.
so a counter argument to that, I understand where you're coming from and what these people said, but like a counter argument is they did that originally. They had cards for Warcry,
Yep.
and people didn't like that, and so they went to books.
Okay. So
So, they tried it. I'm sure some people thought, and obviously for some people it was better. Otherwise, they wouldn't have released these cards, right?
Mhm.
But apparently, people just like the book format more.
So with the book format, it's really something where it works well when you don't have to eventually. It works well when you can eventually learn what's in the book and not have to keep referencing back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think the stats in that are sufficient? Are like simple enough? You can get them memorized after maybe 10 games.
I think of your own army, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe it doesn't
Especially, yeah.
maybe it doesn't matter that there's no cards because in reality,
Yeah.
if there were cards or there was the book, after that maybe 10 games, you'll just stop using either. So the format doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So to me, I feel like the rub is not the compendium. Like I understand the compendium, right? You don't want people to just play Orc Commandos versus Imperial Guard. Like if that's the only thing you're releasing on release, you're like, okay, and here's some basic rules that we've kind of somewhat play tested for all the other factions that you're expecting, right? That and will eventually be coming as a fully fleshed out thing, right? But then telling people you have to pay $50, especially when a lot of people only have one or two kill teams in that book,
Yep.
right? So let's say I only have Primaris Intercessors and Plague Marines.
Yep.
And now you're telling me pay $50 so that I can have two lists out of the 50, just like 6 pages out of that list, out of that book.
A little more, but yeah.
And I don't use the rest of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a haul, and then eventually we're going to replace that with the true rules of your two factions. That's like a huge ask of someone to pay $50, right?
Yeah, if they wanted to build goodwill, like releasing this whole compendium, because it's nice, but if they just released it online and let people go through, play the armies, then let the community play test it for them, and then
you're definitely play testing. That's a good point. If you buy this compendium and you start playing it, you are play testing for them when the true armies of these versions, the true version of these armies comes out.
Yeah, and they may have to just get rid of the whole thing or errata it.
They will. Like as soon as like a new like the Adeptus Mechanicus version comes out, I'm sure it'll be like, you can't use compendium anymore. You have to use this new rule set for these guys.
Yeah. Okay. So we think that's going to go away.
So I feel like when a lot of people, like there's been some hubbub, I guess, about the compendium, right? And would you say that the general complaints that people had were true or unfounded?
Oh, I didn't read.
So I guess there's two things.
So your thing that you saw, what was the main complaint you were seeing from people?
There are two complaints, basically. That the one complaint is that there's not enough customization and it feels like very limiting on what you can build. And the second one is, why are we paying $50 for this? Mm-hmm. When you have so many different games that release this kind of stuff for free, and including Games Workshop. They've released rules for free with Apocalypse, which is a much better rule set.
Yeah, given how simple the armies are, it doesn't feel worth the money. It just feels like they looked at the boxes they wanted to sell you, mm-hmm. and then wrote an army for the boxes that they figure are applicable to the game. So I
think they could have easily released all of the compendium online, and they would lose, the $50 that they do to sell to all these people, but they would have gained a lot of goodwill. Because then the story changes entirely. When you get a $50 product, you're like, these lists better be super detailed. They better not just be like a kind of tide you over until the true release, right? These guys, I have to get $50 worth of gameplay out of them, right? Mm-hmm. But when these rules are like we said, not super balanced in my opinion in terms of who can play against who, and then not super detailed. Plus, you're only going to use a couple of the list, like a couple of pages out of the book, unless you have like every single faction, right? It just feels like a terrible buy. So in my opinion, in terms of the price for thing, I think that's totally valid. When you're saying
Yeah.
why would you pay $50? I would not pay $50 for this.
Nope. So going back to
Luckily, we did not have to because we borrowed the
yeah,
book to
we
get all
borrowed it
this.
from we borrowed it from our friend,
Yes.
our
So
anonymous.
we found how ways to borrow the thing so that we could actually get the rules so we could go and play, right?
Yeah.
And in that case, if you're able to borrow it, it doesn't feel so bad because I feel like the second one of not being able to customize things, I think it's a little bit overblown. If you
Yeah,
think
because
about them as intro lists to tide you over until they have the full
Mhm.
release, it is enough customization, I think.
Yeah, because the game's just not meant to be played this way. And just going out, if they did create the armies, if they made those army lists that are the would be equivalent of what's in the Octarius box, you would have to go out and buy so many different boxes to compile these armies that people would be like, oh my God, it's $400 to buy this bespoke army. And people would freak out over that. If you were going to start a new Kill Team faction and you had to buy like you needed components from say 5 different boxes, I think people would freak out over that.
So that's possibly true, but the kind of issue is like the kill teams that they put together. Like some people
Yep.
were saying, "Hey, the reason why you only have 5 intercessors is because that's what comes in. I don't know, one of the intro packs or something like that. Although I think it's 6 that come in. But there's a lot of factions where that's just not true. For example, I played my Adeptus Mechanicus list, right?
Yep.
And Adeptus Mechanicus, the box that you buy it comes with 10 guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many Adeptus Mechanicus guys are in a kill team?
Well, it was 11.
Is 11. So literally, you have to either proxy with like a hero or you have to buy 2 fucking boxes to be able to play your Adeptus Mechanicus.
Yeah. And can you take 2 of the same weapons for the special ones or
Yes.
not? So
Yes,
maybe
you
you
can.
so maybe you want to be able to double up some of the options.
So yeah. So here's the thing. I guess it's the same thing like the Gene Stealer cults, right? Technically, actually, in the old version of Kill Team, the intro box, you couldn't build a full pointed version of the Gene Stealers. So maybe it's not that different. It's like if you played the old Kill Team and you realize, hey man, what the hell? I can't. This is not a full game.
Yep.
I guess things have actually changed because the at least Octarius is a full game, right? You face orcs versus guard. It feels like if you use those 2 armies, it's a full game.
Yep.
But if you buy that compendium, nah, man, that's the same old Games Workshop.
Yep. And well, anyways, I think that's enough about the compendium because people didn't complain about that issue with the indexes
They
back in 8th
complained about
edition. People sort of
yeah,
thought those were worth the money. They just didn't realize they were going to be throwing them away.
replaced it. They complained a little bit, but it is true. They didn't realize how much they're going to throw it away so quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right.
So should we go back to maybe where we would have started with the rules themselves?
Yeah. So, well, I would. There is another. Yeah, sure. Let's do it. So
Okay.
I don't know if we want to run through the entire like rule system, right? You can just look online. There's lots of different ways to play, but the general feeling of the game, what does it evoke?
Oh, it actually feels pretty deadly, even though things have fairly high wound counts relatively. Like they've got like 7 wounds to like 14 wounds for a Marine.
Yeah.
So you're
13, I think.
13?
13, yeah.
I think it was 13. So even like the weapons can output fairly high damage for certain weapons.
Yeah.
So it felt deadly. And with the new mechanic for sneaking around, it actually felt like you weren't just because the Games Workshop terrain is quite simple. Well, it's not simple, but it's just not meant for very technical play. It's just meant to look cool. They've managed to create a rule set that sort of works around how the terrain has giant holes through it, or it's just sort of funky shapes that it will let you sneak up the board rather than just having to have a shootout. So I do appreciate that. I also
Yeah, so I
appreciate.
feel like it's true. Like when they said kill team, they really did think about like covert ops and things like that. And I think the game that they fashioned tries to sell that covert ops team sneaking around stuff. Now, what that the question about that is that really what you want from a Warhammer 40,000 game, right? Because the sneaking is so important, right? And so the question is, when you're playing a Warhammer 40,000 kill team, are you thinking about being like solid snake and stuff like that and sneaking around? Does that feel like Warhammer 40,000?
No, it's not the universe, but I mean, it's a skirmish game, and it's a good way to go with the skirmish game. So
You know what? I agree. I feel like this is a corner of the Warhammer 40,000 universe that can make sense. Like if it's Veteran Guard versus Orc Commandos, it sells that, right?
yeah.
That's sneaking around and stuff like that. If it is just like a random bunch of orcs versus random Adeptus Mechanicus, does it really feel right? To me, when I look at the Warhammer 40,000 art, it's like the quintessential thing is a space marine out, not in cover, just like blasting away into the ether, right? And just killing everything with laying down fire.
Hmm.
But when I think about the way I would want to play kill team, it is so much more sneaking around, right? So to me, I feel like this is somewhat a mismatch, I guess, between uh, the compendium again, right, and the armies that you're playing. So if you're playing scouts, like Space Marine scouts, who are supposed to be sneaking around, or they're new inceptors or whatever you call that, the guys that sneak around, it makes sense for Space Marines, right? But it doesn't make sense for like for example, custodes to be running around, sneaking around. It just feels weird. The rule set that they fashioned doesn't match.
Their armor doesn't even look like they should be able to crouch. No.
Exactly, right? And their giant hats like give them away immediately, right?
Hmm.
So I just feel like uh, I don't think this is necessarily a criticism of the rule set. I think this is a criticism of the setting and the way people want to play and the replacement that they're getting, right? And that the original Kill Team was very much a you know skirmish version of 40k, right? The idea is you take your Plague Marines, you take your Adeptus Mechanicus or whatever, and then you just fight them over the battles in a skirmish kind of way. This new Kill Team definitely feels like it's trying to lean into the covert ops stuff,
Yep.
which is a specific group, and it's weird to have random people running in and doing it, and it ends up not feeling, in my opinion, it feels like a thematic mismatch.
Yeah, so they possibly shouldn't have created some of the armies. That's just what it comes down to. But of course, you have to have Marines. So
All right. So, uh, given that mismatch, though, are the actual rules in gameplay? Let's say you're running the scouts. Does it feel good?
yeah, it felt like the game felt more tactical than the first version. The first version I felt like was running once you'd position your guys, I felt like you were forced into a lot of your actions, that there was a clear action you would do,
Uh
and that the decisions seemed to be less important.
huh.
Whereas in this version of Kill Team, it felt much more like there was tactical decisions to be made. So
Yeah.
they've definitely made a big improvement on the previous version. That's overall
Yeah.
my impression.
I think I agree. I feel like there were a couple of like worries that I had. For example, the combat system, where in terms you both roll your dice, and then you go back and forth, and I felt that's a little bit clunky. But actually, after playing it out, I felt like it was a lot better than I had expected. Right.
Because
First of all, I didn't understand the rules initially when I was worried about it, so like it just plays out differently than I expected it to,
mhm,
which is good. But then the way that you play it out, I feel like even though you're rolling first and then you get to like allocate your dice afterwards, it's generally really quick because you generally know what you're doing, and it kind of creates a little bit of a story about what happens in this melee combat, right? So basically how it works is I roll dice, you roll dice, and then I allocate either parry, like remove one of your dice or one of your hits, or I hit you with the dice, right? There are situations in this combat where it'll feel thematic. For example, but generally you know exactly what you want to do. You either want to kill the guy or you want to prevent damage, right? But and generally it's mostly kill, right? But every once in a while you have this thematic feeling of like of let's say I had 3 hits and you had 1 hit, then I will parry my hit and then do the 2 hits and kill you, right? And if you play that out, the fact that you allocate the dice after you've rolled the dice, it kind of forces you into the story, right? It kind of, I guess, reveals the story of saying, oh yeah, I parried you flailed at me badly, I parried the hit and then I struck you down, right? That kind of story evolves out of the way you're allocating, even though generally it's generally straightforward. It's not like super deep thinking when you're doing combat.
Yeah, it's what you get to create out of versus roles as well, and the fact that you can allocate your versus roles different ways. Whereas the previous version of Killteam, you would just hit, then hit back, which it doesn't. Once you've played enough good skirmish games, you realize that the idea that one person, like if you're fighting a giant demon, the demon's just going to stand there and let you sort of hack away them with your little axe. He's not going to do that.
Rochambeau them?
Yeah, he's not going to be like, oh, you hit me, I hit you. Yeah, let's go, man. The demon's going to be like, oh, you've got your little axe? Well, I've got my like 10-foot sword. You don't even get near me. I just like slice you down.
Yeah, so there's a lot more back and forth, which is a lot more fun in those ways.
Yeah.
I will say though there are 2 other issues that I have, which are not necessarily with the actual gameplay, but with the rules as they're written down. One of them is, I think, one of the major controversies, if not the biggest controversy that a lot of people talk about, is the shapes for the distances. So in Killteam, instead of measuring 2 inches, 3 inches, 6 inches, you measure circles, which is 2 inches, squares, triangles, and pentagons for 6.
Yeah, not hexagons. Definitely couldn't be hexagons for 6.
Yeah, people were very confused. They're like, why do you need this when you have perfectly good inches, right? And people had a lot of theories of why this might make sense. Having played it, does it make sense to you?
No, they didn't seem to end up using the different, like, because I thought once I read that, I'm like, oh, they're going to have modifiers to the shapes. And if you're using a particular type of shape, that shape might get modified by rules. Then they didn't have any rules that did that modification. I'm like, why? Like, I thought they were going somewhere and it went nowhere.
Yeah. To be fair, I feel like if they went that way, it would still be terrible. But
understandable.
But no, just obtuse and non-understandable. No, I would disagree. I think it would be a very stupid idea to do that. I think you would gain very little for making a system that is overly complicated when you have a very much more simple system right now, right? Like, especially your movement is now in 2-inch blocks. So it's like 3 circle or 2 circle.
Mm-hmm.
That's just confusing, right? Because now before, like if you look at a game like X-Wing, right? It has templates, but they make sense because you literally just choose one of the templates and go, right?
Yep.
In Killteam, you still do multiples of the templates. So it looks like they looked at the X-Wing templates and they tried to say, hey, we should do templates too, but they didn't figure out why they work, right? It's you choose a template. If you're going to do templates, every distance should be templates.
But instead,
shouldn't have 2 circle.
Well, the thing is,
terrible design.
If you were forced to move in 2-inch increments, then having 3 circle, I don't even want to use these names. Having 3 circle movement would make sense if you were forced to move in 2-inch lines at once. But that's not how movement works in this game. You have to move in 1-inch increments.
Unless you're moving up or down, like vertically.
Yes, then you move in 2-inch increments. So
the game, okay, let's just play it out there. The shapes are stupid. They make the game much more complicated than it needs to be. Everything would be simpler with just numbers. Everyone understands numbers, and it's so much harder to understand the relative relationship between a triangle and a circle and a square, because a square, if you say square distance, right? It's useful information to know a square distance is 3 triangles. As in 3 inches, right? It's useful to know that like 1 inch is like it takes 1 inches to make 3 inches, right? Which would be 3 triangles to a square. It basically becomes algebra, right? And it obfuscates the algebra, not the algebra, sorry, the geometry. It obfuscates the geometry that comes naturally to people and everyone learns in grade 5, right?
Yeah.
So they're throwing out all this learning that's intrinsic and that most people know for no real gain. It's basically to make people have to do algebra problems. And you look at like, you remember we were looking at the, was it with you? No. I was looking at it with one of the other people I played with. And the mission set said 3 square, I believe. And I was like, what does this mean? And then I was like, oh, that means 9 inches, right? Because when I was looking at it, there's shapes for the objectives, and then there's like a 3 square, and I'm like, oh, what does a 3 square mean? And
you couldn't have just read 9. Like,
yeah, of course. And that means that you have 3 square. Why didn't they just do 9 triangle? If everything was in triangles, it would be easier.
Yeah.
So I don't mind if they don't use inches, if they just use triangles. So that entire thing was bad. And then, in my opinion, there's no reason to use that. I think all the complaints that you've heard, it's true. It's just stupid, and you just have to get over it.
Yep.
That said, if you memorize all those distances, right, and you never look at your sheet anymore, and you've translated it in your head, right?
Yeah. Once you're done reading the rule book, because once you start playing a few games, you stop going back to the rule book.
Yeah.
So luckily, all the stupidity that's in the rule book for how they describe things in
and your cards,
your ways,
and your objective cards and all that kind of stuff.
Your stat cards and your missions. Once you've learned what those are and you've got them in your head, you can now throw it away and have to stop, and you just talk about it in normal measurements.
Yes, and you don't have to think about it, and it becomes so much more clear. So this problem, it's terrible for your first 10 games, but if you play it, if this is your regular game, it will fade to nothingness.
Yep. So it's not a permanent issue. Yeah. So it's not something you should hold. If you like the gameplay, it's not something that will affect the gameplay.
Yes, exactly. Like, this is just bad rules writing. There's like, literally, if you just had someone, if you literally just drew in the numbers in every single square or whatever, and or cross them out and put the actual inches in, the game would be so much, like, you'd solve this issue.
It'd be easier to read the rule book. Yep.
Yeah, it would be much better. So the other issue with the rule book is it's terribly written. I don't know if you tried to learn the game from reading the rules, but it is written in bad legalese. Like, everything is overly wordy and overly obtuse, and sometimes I have to read a sentence like 3 times, right? And I read a lot of technical stuff, right, in work, and this is super obtuse. It is like one of the worst rule books in terms of, don't get me wrong, it's super pretty. It has beautiful art in it. It has this like new style, like 2D comic art in it. It's great. 2D, sorry, black and white comic art.
Yeah, it feels like great. Yeah, it feels like a modern version of that 80s sort of heavy metal look for the comics they had back like then. But it's now been brought into the modern day. It's a really great modern interpretation of that dark.
I feel like it's filtered through Mike Mignola, which is Hellboy kind of art. It looks good. So it's beautiful, right? The rulebook is beautiful, and it's well, like, graphically designed. But the actual words in that book made me want to shoot myself. And again, though, this is not a real problem if you've actually, if you can circumvent this problem by just going online and learning from someone who has gone through the pains of reading that rule book, right? Like, a lot of the games we play, we didn't learn them directly, right? Eventually, we would read the rule book just to learn the small intricacies. But a lot of games, we just learned it from other people who have learned the game. And if that's how you learn Killteam, you don't have to worry about the rule book. Don't even fucking buy the rule book. Just learn it from other people.
It'll just confuse you, yeah.
Yes. So I don't know. That's another $50 that to me is not worth
No,
it.
you can if you like the armies, you buy Octarius and then don't read the rule book. You just
Oh,
throw
that's
the rule
true.
book away rather than hurting
Just
yourself.
look at the art. It's pretty.
Yep. There you go.
All right. Or be
So
like me and just rewrite it so that I could read it.
just rewrite it and never
Just
read it
have a
again.
document that I rewrote all the rules with inches and everything like that, so I don't have to worry about reading.
So you never have to read the rule
stupid
book
stuff.
again.
Yes. All right. Third thing, I think I mentioned this a little bit. Distance. I feel like, although I feel like their combat systems are quite interesting, their shooting and or fine. I guess they're not interesting. Uh, their shooting and their combat is fine, and even there's some strengths to their combat, like close combat attack. I think their movement rules are bad, actually. I think this is one criticism I would say is more than just like hard to understand, which is what happens in a lot of it. I feel like the rule system is a mishmash of 3 or 4 different rules and 3 or 4 different ways to do things. Like we said, when you're moving normally horizontally, you move in inch increments, right? But when you're
Yep.
moving vertically, you move in 2-inch increments. That why? Why would you
Yeah.
change it? Right?
Yes, they could have just written the part because they were trying to make it so you could round up, so you get an extra 2-inch movement when you're going down, so you can kind of drop. But that could have just been written as you can drop 2 inches for free, and they wouldn't need to have all the new increment rules comparison to moving horizontally.
And then my favorite part of their movement things is that when you move through difficult terrain, it's just literally or move over something you need to hurdle. It's just a straight -2 inches, which is a great rule. It's very simple, super simple. But then why did they use that for all the other things like vertical movement? Instead, they have this weird rounding up, rounding down thing when you're moving vertically. It just feels like 3 or 4 different rules, one of which I like, but like scattered around in their movement kind of distances. And then they, instead of saying you can just move twice, they have like 4 or 5 different versions of move actions you can do, and saying every action is one, which is not terrible. But like, do they really need 4 or 5? I just feel like it added extra complication where it didn't have to, especially because a lot of those movement rules say, like, if you fall back, you cannot no longer charge or move. So they added all these exceptions. They split out this types of movement to a whole bunch of different actions, and then they added exceptions to say that you can't actually do those two together. And it just felt really ugly and clunky in this in the movement phase. But let's get past the movement phase. So how about the hiding stuff that we talked about, and how about the combat and the shooting?
So the hiding in this game, you've got to decide between whether you're sort of sneaking or whether you're in the like fighting, which they call engaged or whatever.
Yep.
So it's a lot of tokens on the board, which I think you could probably just they do it so you know what things you've activated. But fortunately, unlike the previous version where you would go through your movement and combat, then you would have to go through all your guys again for doing shooting. In this version, you do all your guys' activations at once. So I think that you don't need the activated. You can actually remember what you've activated so far that turn. Usually,
so you mean not all like consecutively, but like you go back and forth choosing one guy. Yeah. So it's the normal alternating activation of most skirmish games.
But you've got to mark whether the guys are engaged or whether they're. They didn't call it prone. I keep thinking prone because prone's the infinity version, but it's different because the guy is actually standing for the sake of being able to shoot them.
Yeah.
But you have to be, but depending on the terrain that's in between the two, that affects the state that you're in, affects whether you can shoot.
Yeah.
So I think that once you eventually get used to all the
just
cases,
one point that was the rule that was so hard to understand until we understood it and then simplified it and like when I was trying to figure it out, I was trying to figure out the exact cover versus like when you're sneaking, whether you can be seen or not. If you read the rule book for that, you will want to shoot yourself. But like it's actually quite simple.
Yep. That's why you don't. That's why I try and get someone else to explain it to you yet again.
Yes, exactly.
So the rules worked quite nicely just based around.
And if you want to know what the rules are, go look online. We're not telling you here.
No, go watch some videos. Whatever.
Yes, exactly. Anyways, go on.
Some of the rules for that felt good. And the combat, where I would have preferred if you'd roll the dice at the same time, because you have to roll your dice to shoot first.
Mm-hmm.
And then that causes different AP effects. So you can't really roll both at once, which slows the game down a little. But at least you don't have to make quite as many rolls as the previous one, where you'd have to roll, because they base it entirely off 40k in the previous version. We have to roll the hit, then you've got to roll to beat their toughness value with your weapon strength. Then they get to save. In this one, they've luckily cut it down to just rolling. You make your rolls, they do their, well, it's kind of 3, but you roll to see if you get AP off. Then they roll their defense.
Yeah,
and then
they take their wounds.
And they take their wounds based on the weapon's power, how much damage is out per hit.
It's a lot cleaner with just those two. I agree.
Yeah. So I like that part. It made things resolve faster because it feels more decisive and it's just more exciting without having to just sit there doing all this accounting. So that part.
Unlike the movement, I think this is actually quite a good system. I think it works really well. I like the fact that, for defense, you just always roll 3 dice, which is cute, right? It's nice. It's just quick to do. The issue, again, with Games Workshop is a lot in the details, right? Like one of my favorite rule sets for Games Workshop is Warhammer Apocalypse. And the base rule set for Warhammer Apocalypse is super good. And I think that the base rule set for this new version of Killteam is quite good for this Covert Ops team. However, I feel like the devil's in the details, because in Killteam, one of the main things to get through armor is AP. So it's always been armor pendant, right? And AP in Killteam is super good because normally people roll 3 dice for defense, but AP means that you can cut their dice down to only 2 or even 1, right?
Yep.
And when your gun has 3 or even 4 shots, right? And you reduce, so if I'm rolling 4 shots and they only have 2 dice to defend, and basically they have to roll a number to cancel one of my hits.
Mm-hmm.
If they only have 2 dice, they can maximum cancel only 2 of my hits, which means that I'm already pushing through a lot of damage, right? And by virtue of the fact that you can also re-roll your rolls, if you don't hit, you can basically destroy people with AP, and this is to me a problem of like balancing, right? Especially when you look at these people that are supposed to be super armored and are originally super armored in Warhammer 40,000, like Adeptus Custodes or Space Marines, right? When you hit them with an AP gun, it is super strong.
Yeah, it looks like they've just tried to give them more health, but the question is it enough health to make up for how much AP is out?
So that's the thing. Like if AP wasn't as strong, right? In some ways it'd be okay with AP because an AP is supposed to be a plasma gun. It's supposed to like shoot through the armor, right? Mm-hmm. But the amount of damage like a plasma gun does is obscene. It's like, is it 5.6?
Something like that, 5.
Or 5 or 5.6. And a Space Marine only has 13 life, and then they reduce the number of armor saves that you have. It's like a plasma gun shot can kill a Space Marine in one go. And maybe that's it's not even super crazy for them to kill a Space Marine in one go.
Yeah, because you played Adeptus Mechanicus, which has a lot of, against someone else that has a lot of plasma. And we played
can have 4 AP1 guns, which is a ton when you think about the fact that a Primaris squad only has 5 guys.
So you can dish out AP on them every round as long as your guys are alive. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And because you have the sneaking rules and it goes together with this kind of guns, right? Like I like the sneaking rules. I like this kind of stuff. But when you put it all together, 4 AP1 guns that are like 4 or 5 damage and up is super high against Space Marines, especially when these guns are supposed to be able to kill Space Marines like possibly in one go, right? And it's not like I only had 5 guys. I had 11 guys. So I had 6 more guys after that. And that rolls into, I think, another problem with the system is
how the number of models interact with the missions.
Yes. So you want to go through that?
Sure. So the mission we played was sort of the basic mission where you've got 5 objectives, 1 in the center and then 4 around the corners. Yeah. And then you basically need to be controlling them to get points every turn.
Yep.
And which means if you're playing the Marine player, you've got to like dedicate a large part of your army to sitting back there, which might be in the open,
Yep.
or it might just be in a terrible position. You get no shots off, but you've got to leave a guy there for the whole game or run a guy off somewhere else where he's not behaving optimally to go get another objective. Whereas if you're playing a higher model count army, you can afford to just sacrifice some of your cheaper models who aren't going to dish out that much punishment anyways, to just leave them behind to do the mission. So you're scoring full points from them, and the rest of your guys go out and hinder the enemy, kill guys, and all that.
Yeah.
So you're just functioning way more effectively in the mission context. Maybe if the mission was just straight kill each other, the 5 Primaris versus the like, how many orcs would you get? Like a dozen?
10. 10 orcs or 11 Adeptus Mechanicus.
Yep.
You have 11 or 12 guys for orcs, base orcs. I'm thinking of Commandos.
If you were just fighting for the game's 4 turns, if you were just fighting for that 4 turns to kill each other, they might be evenly matched. But that they've gone and made more detailed missions. And you've got your sort of secondary objectives that also require you sending people around.
Yeah.
So without enough guys, you're at a loss for just sending your resources, which are your troops, out to do the mission.
Yep. So they basically, a lot of the missions you have to just babysit the objectives. And if you have 5 guys and you have 2 objectives you're trying to babysit, your Space Marine, that you're spending what, 40%? 5 guys, 40% of your guys just have to babysit the objectives. Whereas if you're Adeptus Custodes, not Adeptus Custodes. If you're Adeptus Custodes, you only have 4 guys. You're babysitting 50%, even if they don't die, right? Against Plasma, they'll probably die. Versus if you have Mechanicus, you have 2 out of your 11. You only have to spend like less than 20% babysitting these 2 objectives, and the rest of your army can go out and fight, right? And do the rest of it. It's just a huge mismatch, right? Which means that if you're running these low number guys that have to do objectives, it's not going to. You're already really down, which means your guys have to be either really good or you just can't use those armies in those missions, right? So what does that mean? Like in Space Marines, the only army that has like 10 guys is Scouts. And to be fair, I think I haven't played them, but I looked at the Scout list and it looks strong. But does that just mean that like 60% of the time you're going to be playing missions? If you pick a random one, you're going to be running your Scouts?
60 sounds too low.
Okay, sure. Unless it's like literally kill the guys, then you're only going to be using your Scouts. Maybe that's what's going to happen, which is, I guess, fine because at least Scouts are thematic in terms of sneaking around. Maybe it's a secret thing where they're like, technically you can play your intercessors, but you should be really playing Scouts, and we ever play tested it with Scouts. Maybe this is part of the conspiracy. They're just trying to push you to play Scouts with Space Marines.
It could be because they more fit the mold of the game. So just don't, like we said before, the game doesn't feel like you should be bringing these badass Marines to just gun everyone down. It's a covert ops games. If you try to bring Custodes, you try to bring Marines, you're playing the game wrong and you should be punished.
Exactly.
There's the other conspiracy. They've suck intentionally because you're not playing the game right.
Yes, exactly. Or maybe the other thing is like, okay, so you want to play down and you want to play your Space Marines. You know, like Blood Bowl, where you have like tier 1, 2, and 3 lists. So Primaris are just tier 3, just the bad armies, and it's fine though if the other person plays like heretical like Chaos Space Marines and you play Space Marines. The game will be fine. You both suck.
There you go.
Tier 3.
They don't need to make a giant errata for the compendium. They just need to make a list of tiers.
Yes, exactly.
If you play the Space Marines, you will be in tiers.
Exactly. So I feel like that's a problem if you just want to play randomly, and especially if you're playing pickup games and you want to run your Adeptus, you want to play your Primaris, you're going to be sad with a lot of missions.
So
and they possibly might just suck against certain armies.
So back to good things though. Like this was
let's not tear against this totally. Let's not tear into this.
No, it's I don't know.
Wait, can I tear into one more thing?
I guess.
Okay, one more thing, and then we'll go to positives and end on a positive-ish note. All right. So the other thing that kind of annoys me with the the difference in numbers is that they try to fix this with the Space Marines having 3 actions, which we said just doesn't really work. The other thing is that they give you Overwatch, which means that you can actually attack twice. Like if you have activated all your guys, you can shoot a guy again. Like a guy can shoot again afterwards, right?
Yeah, after all your guys have gone.
Yeah, after all your guys have gone. But I don't feel like that's enough against a 10-man list, because you can only shoot in Overwatch if you are in engagement state, which means that you can be shot back, right? So you have shot in a way that you can get shot back, right? But if you have 10 guys, right, you can save all of your strongest weapons to go last. So you can just be like, I send out my 6 shitty guys to force your Space Marines. If they want to Overwatch, they have to stick their head out. And then as soon as they do, I can use my plasma gun as my last action and just blast that guy. And if I go first next turn, I get to blast him again and then move away.
Oh yeah, because you pick on the one guy. You're like, well, you only Overwatch once, so you shoot
him. You
don't
even get to Overwatch at all if my plasma guy goes last. Well, at least not against good guys, right?
No. But like if it takes a few crappy guys to kill the guy, okay, he shoots back once, but then your crappy guys just overwhelm him, and then you've got him.
Well, you save your strong shooters for last, right? So that they can't Overwatch.
Oh, you send something crappy, eat up his Overwatch, and then send
not even eat up his Overwatch, because the Overwatch only happens after you attack, like if they have a chance to go. But if you used your plasma last, they don't get to Overwatch.
Nope.
And they have to stick their head out before you move your plasma guy, because there's no passing mechanism. You just have to activate your 5 Space Marines, and then they've activated. And if my plasma is still hiding, then they could not shoot my plasma. But because you activated your guys, if any of those guys stick their head out, my plasma can activate and shoot your guy.
Yep.
So they are my plasma, because I've outnumbered your guys, because I activate 5 guys, shitty guys for your 5 Space Marines. You're never going to be able to Overwatch against my plasma.
Yep.
So
I don't
know.
Yeah, it means you're more obvious what you're doing.
Not never. Obviously, you can, depending on how the order is. It's just a huge advantage, right? To be able to hold your guys back, your best guys back, and they don't have any way to fix that.
And you're forced to reveal your plan for your movement for that turn. And in a short-term game, like it's only 4 turns, you're just giving away all your plans, and then your opponent can outmaneuver you.
Yep, like in Malifaux, they give you pass tokens, right? If you have less guys, so I can say, oh well, I don't want to pop out my guy with the heavy gun, so that your heavy guy can shoot him. I'm just gonna pass, right? And you know, we're doing a skirmish game as well. That's like in this kind of vein, right? In space, we have just a pass mechanic. You can always just pass, right? And if you pass too many times, the round ends, right? But like to help to kind of balance that out, to not make it so that the guy who with less guys is forced to activate before, like to become vulnerable before the other person, you need to have that kind of ability to pass or something, or react when they move out. Like Infinity, for example, allows you to react, right?
Yep.
So
although
it's not it's not alternate activation, so it's not exactly the same, but yeah. Okay, so that's the last thing. Let's go to the good stuff. Spoiler alert. Do you think this game what do you think of this game?
I think it's a vast improvement on the previous version. And I think it actually it does a good job of filling a particular niche, where if you're in that niche, this is going to be the game you want to play. So let's say if you're not into very complicated games, this has a bit of a bar to entry to it. So, and if you don't want to like build a lot of models, because you're gonna have to build a fair number of models to get different kill teams to go into your faction if you care about winning. So if you just want to bring a couple models, I think Stargrave is probably easier to get into because the rules are simpler and everything else like that.
Yeah, I think Stargrave is the science fiction version of Frostgrave. It's a skirmish game that's heavily into campaigns. But yeah.
So I think if you want like an easy game, this is not necessarily the easiest game to get into and to learn.
Yeah, I do not think this is a beginner game. If
No,
this is
like
your first war game, I would not recommend it.
no, like you would have. It's probably not the game for kids, but
Yeah.
interestingly, like they're putting out a board game soon that looks like Kill Team ish.
Oh yeah.
So maybe that's the one that's meant for kids,
Okay, fair
and the
enough.
Kill Team is just meant for adults with no time, but who are capable of learning the rule set.
So like old 40K players who just want to like assemble one squad and then get a game in every once in a while,
Yeah,
right? But they
exactly.
want a deeper tactical kind of thing with hiding and stuff like that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and if your game store can't keep giant 4x6 tables
Hmm.
or 4x4 tables even,
Yeah.
then maybe this is what you go to because not every game
Yeah.
store can afford that sort of space. They just have sort of card tables because there may be a magic card store,
Yeah.
which brings them in money. And if you want to like if they could offer that product and you could play on the same tables as a magic
Yeah.
card player.
Yeah. I totally agree. I feel like as much as, I pointed out all the negative things, I
Mhm.
think that, like I said, the actual gameplay is fun. It's tactical, right? And I really liked so you get like command points every round, and then you can spend them to do stratagems, right? And
Mhm.
you could and unlike uh, 8th edition, which had like 20 odd ones, it's much more tight, right? There's only one generic one, which is reroll. And then you have like basically a sheet's worth of stratagems that you can use these command points for, right?
Mhm.
And that felt fun and interesting, like that I'm trying to spend this resource, and it added a lot of flavor to your guys without feeling like it's overburdening you with too many options, most of which don't even matter, right?
Mhm.
So in that way, I feel like that part is really strong. And then if you like that covert action sneaking kind of thing, and if your armies are roughly like the same tier, right? I feel like there's quite a good gameplay there, right? There's a back and forth kind of thing. They do have scenarios, and the secondaries are secret, which adds a little bit
Yep.
of interest to the game.
Yeah, and they represent 4 out of the 12 points, so they're worth something.
They're
They're
worth a
really
good
worth
chunk,
something.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
you're
very
going to try
cool
and do those. Yeah.
because it feels very.
Six out of 14. I don't remember.
Oh yeah, it's 6 because you have 3 cards and you can get two
It can't
points
be
from each.
12. It's got to be more than 12, right? Because two is.
Yeah, I thought there were. Anyways.
Anyways, it's a decent chunk, right? You can
Mhm.
definitely win off your secondaries, I believe.
Yeah, if you don't score much on the first one. Mhm.
Yeah. So, um,
And the
yeah. So
game,
I.
the time it takes to play a game, it was my first game, and we
Mhm.
managed to play it in around an hour.
No, we didn't.
So it's not like
No, we
obviously.
didn't.
Oh, okay, it was an hour and like a half.
No, this game was long, man. You're
Really?
thinking about the other game that we played.
Oh,
We'll
okay,
talk
that's
about
correct.
next thing.
Yes, yes.
This game is long. It's like an
Yeah,
hour and I think like when you end up playing it, it is not short. It is going to be like an hour and a half, I think.
yeah. Okay.
And spent more than that. We spent like two and something, and I had already played it before,
I'm
and we
confused
spent
because
two
we played
something.
with the same models. I'm like, it
Yes,
looked the same. No, it wasn't the same.
yeah, yeah. We did end up playing one page rules, which is the one we're going to talk about another time. But like, I feel like Killteam, it does take a little bit of time, but I think you get a lot of strategy and you get a fun. And if the point of the game is to um, get like if you like that kind of more crunchiness, right, in your game, and you like the covert action portions of Warhammer 40,000 universe, then I think this would be a really good game. I think they said that every 3 months they're going to release two different factions, right? And I
Okay.
think if you play those two, I think this is actually going to be a good game.
Yeah, if you agree
And the
with
killer, there's two other killer things that I love about it. One is you can shoot your normal guns can shoot all the way across the board, which I love that. And like when we were making our game, we were like literally put that in because we're like, of course, right? Because when you start looking at distance of actual guns, you're like, 48 by 48, a rifle should be able to go all the way across the board, right?
yeah.
And I love the fact that you can shoot it all the way across the board in the game. And the other thing is that 22 by 30 inch, we already mentioned this, is a killer size. It's so much easier to have enough terrain to put on to make it like a terrain dense board if your board is so much smaller. And as long as the rules are made that it that makes sense in that smaller board, it's totally great. And that to me is like the killer. That might be the thing I like most about Kill Team. The
Yeah,
fact
you
that it's
can
on
have a
22
nice
by
looking
30 inch
board.
board.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
set up. a whole bunch of nice boards because they sell
Yeah, in a
train.
small place. In a small place, you can even play it on a coffee table as opposed to having like a kitchen table, which a lot of games need.
Yep. So it's got a lot of good going for it.
Yeah.
So back to who the game is for. If you want a more complicated game where you can build really amazing lists and you want
Uh-huh.
like more of a simulation, you want deeper, more varied missions,
Mhm.
I think at that point you start looking at Infinity.
Yes, I
If you're
think
willing
if
to,
you really want to like prove that you're really good at the actual game on the tabletop,
Mhm.
and you want to like test your metal, I think there's not really a game like Infinity, like like a competitor to Infinity right now.
Yeah,
It is the most revealing of good gameplay on the tabletop that I've seen right now.
and it reveals who's good painters too, because the models are like the models are top tier.
As
So,
you notice, we really like Infinity. Like, there's a lot
mhm.
going for it, right?
but
But
if you
yeah,
don't quite have that time to invest in like deeply learning the rule sets, learning hundreds of profiles, so when something shows up, you just know how many points it's worth.
hmm
If it's you're somewhere below that like main game dedication,
hmm
I think Kill Team fills a pretty good role because
yeah,
building
somewhere in
those,
between,
yeah,
right?
it's in,
Somewhere in between Infinity and let's say Stargrave or One Page Rules, right?
mhm.
So it's not a beginner game. So not for people that just want to like totally not think at all, right? But it's also not for like super deep thinking, the people that want to really like sink their teeth in, the people that like saying, I don't want to drink at all when I'm playing this game, right? Those type of people, it's not for those people either. But you know what? That's a huge swath, the people in the middle, right? There's a lot of people in the middle, and I think that's the place where you're going to want to play Kill Team. Just don't use the rule books.
Don't use the compendium. Like,
Don't use the compendium. Uh, rewrite your rules so that they're all in inches,
mhm.
and ignore all of the written materials and just play the game. And you have your cool models and your small board. You will, I think, have a lot of fun. Oh, and make sure that your armies are balanced against each other, so you don't run an army that just steamrolls your opponent, because there's definitely a lot of that that'll continue to go on, like just hard counters almost of certain
Yeah,
armies.
you kind of have to agree to what you kind of have to agree. Like in 40K, I'm playing this army, you're playing this army. No, we're
Yeah,
not doing anything stupid and
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Saying I want to bring my Parmeris, don't bring 4 plasma guns, right?
Yeah, basically. Or
Yeah,
don't, or just you play like the Death Guard.
yeah,
Or not the Death Guard,
exactly.
you play the,
Yeah, Death Guard is 5 guys as well. Yeah,
yeah, you've got to have a little bit of decisions over the matches, or when the game evolves and there's more of the bespoke armies are
yeah, the
out,
real armies as we
the
call
real
them, the ones
armies.
that are all like actual covert teams and stuff like that.
Yeah, then you could just
Yeah,
be like, we're playing one of these because this is how the
yeah,
game is meant to be
yeah.
played.
Don't play anything for compendiums. Yeah, I think that once they do it, in some ways, maybe it's like the 8th edition, right? Like a lot of people said, oh, after the codexes started coming out, it's like the real game is when you play with your codexes, not from the index, right?
Yeah, and I
So
think it'll be better for stores too that this game exists because running a 40K tournament and just getting lots of people together to play 40K, the game stores often just
yeah,
don't have the terrain for that. They don't have the space for it.
yeah,
Literally, the time it takes to play a 40K tournament is
yeah,
also extreme.
yeah,
So it's giving game stores a way they can get like people who like 40K models and have 40K armies to come into the store and actually put on events. So
yeah. Yeah, I think it's a vast improvement over the previous version. Not the actual rule books, but the actual rules.
the rule set.
The yeah, the rule set is a vast improvement. The rule books are terrible and in many ways worse. And but the rules, except for the art, the art is beautiful. I actually like the art more in this book than the previous ones. But
Yep.
yeah, so if you can just get around not having to ever read those rule books, uh, you're good to go. And unlike 40K tournaments, the game is, although not short, it's like an hour and a half. So it's long enough that you feel like accomplished after you've played a game.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good length. It's within the good length for skirmish games, I would say.
yeah. I feel like it's a bit too deadly for my tastes, but some people like that. I think there's going to be, if things go badly for you, you could get wiped out on turn 3, which I'm not that fond of. But That's basically the way people play 40K games now because they want their guns to be so powerful, right? Relative to their armor. So, all right. So overall, I think. Any last thoughts about it?
Oh, I think if there's a community that pops up at our game store that starts playing it, I would play it.
Oh wow, this is so much
But
different than the previous one. The last one, you're like,
I
I
don't
won't touch it.
I don't think there will be.
That's fair.
I mean, the 40K players should, but they won't because
Yeah.
there's something wrong with
Yeah.
them.
Well, also, yeah, Apocalypse is a so much better version of playing 40K than normal 40K, and no one plays
And
that
they
either.
didn't figure that one out either. So
Yeah.
can't
So
even blame Games Workshop for this. This is just the people.
yeah, I guess. Yeah, so I think actually this game pleasantly surprised me. Like at first I was really happy because I was like, oh, new rules. But after seeing like a lot of the problems that that spring up, I was really worried. The problems are actually there, but the gameplay after playing it, it kind of wins out, assuming that it continues to grow as a game. There's a good starting point.
It's probably damaging for it to be a competitive game for what they've just done.
Mm-hmm.
But for a casual format, it's probably okay.
Yeah. All right. So yeah. So this is one of the most positive we've been for a Games Workshop game in a long time.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what we say about Blood Bowl when we actually go and play that.
Yep. Hopefully that soon.
Yeah. All right. So if you have any ideas about, or any thoughts you want to share about Killteam, or any questions that you want to ask us, or if you vehemently disagree with us, well, keep it to yourself. Not just kidding. Come and talk to us. You can contact us at contact@diceovereverything.
Yeah, or find us on Facebook at Dice Over Everything, or join the Dice Over Everything group to see what we're up to and let us know your thoughts.
All right. This has been Alan.
It's been Brandon.
Bye.